the shadow of the weary heart. Truth cuts the dark like a flaming dart. Voices rising strong to lift the call. This is the time we give it all.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Lynn Scott Hagerman podcast, where truth has no filter, freedom is our mission, and light exposes the darkness. I am your host, Lynn Scott Hagerman, survivor of child trafficking and medical experimentation underground at a U.S. University Medical Center in conjunction with our government through MKUltra mind control. I am the voice they tried to silence, and I am silent no more. Praise God. Today, I'm an international award-winning human resource consultant, an independent LifeWave distributor, a marathoner weightlifter, child of God, friend to Holy Spirit, and follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, standing strong in mind, body, and spirit. Be sure to visit my websites, QGrit, the letter Q, GRIT.org, where I am helping with the rescue of trafficked children, both above ground and underground, as well as providing the aftercare for the little ones and helping adults with any type of trauma recover from that. Also, be sure to visit Live Younger with Lynn, LYNNE.com, where you can purchase the X39 and Celergize to regenerate your stem cells. It is the wearable med bed, the fountain of youth. Now, let's get to the truth. Today I welcome on the show Chris Zampogna. He is an attorney in D.C., and he's going to reveal the truth. We're going to hear some truth today, my friends, about these crime statistics, the corruption in policing, the prosecutorial abuse in Washington, D.C. and all across America. He is behind enemy lines right now in Washington, D.C., and he is serving justice and speaking truth. He has over 30 years of experience in law. He's going to tell us how in DC and nationwide, police will manipulate the crime data to get promoted and make money, how prosecutors will indict innocent people to look tough on crime, and how judges protect the system, and it's all for power and money. We're also going to unpack President Trump's executive order against cashless bail, Liberation Day, the takeover of the DC police, and the coming National Guard deployments in 19 states. Praise God. And now I'm going to welcome to the stage Chris. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Glenn.
I'm excited. We have had conversations before today about what is happening in DC, what is happening nationwide. And I am so grateful to you for your service that you have been doing and for your willingness to come on and tell us what's actually happening.
I think it's important to get the word out. I mean, the venues that people hear information from don't really talk about what's going on, and your show and others have been and are very important to people knowing what is really happening.
Exactly. Now, you have a law firm in DC. What is the website that people can go to?
Yeah, it's my last name, ZAMPOGNALAW.com. www, of course, in the beginning. But yeah, my last name in law.
Okay. Now, for DC, we know that Judge Janine is now the, and we all love Judge Janine and have for years. She's a no-nonsense attorney. So she's now U.S. Attorney for DC, and she's conducting a federal investigation of the DC police. So why is she doing that?
Well, it came to light, I believe, in a whistleblower complaint within the last year when an individual was to be terminated, that they made allegations that, hey, I was terminated because I exposed the fact that the police department was manipulating data to decrease the crime statistics to make it look like there's less crime than there was. So I believe that's how. I don't know exactly why it was in, but that is what my belief is, and that came to light. And more has come to light since the nationalization with the National Guard, to see how much crime exists in the district.
Why would so police, the way we the people see the police is they're there to truthful, we can trust them, they're there to protect us and keep us safe. And this does not sound like what's happening. So why would the police lie about crime statistics?
Yeah, I mean, I represent a lot of police. I respect first responders and police officers, but there's a certain level, I guess, not to steal a leftist term, but there's systemic problems with the way policing is happening because there is rewards given to those that show better crime results. Now, that's a good thing. However, if there's more crime, you don't get promoted, basically. If there's less crime, you get promoted, to whittle it down simply. So how do you have less crime? Well, one way is to actually arrest the people. The other one is to change the statistics. And everything I've been hearing about the District of Columbia MPD is all they talk about is statistics at the top level. How many arrests for this? How many? So what's the easiest way to reduce crime? Well, you change the statistics. And that's an incentive for those people to do so, so they get promoted. So not everyone's doing this. It's not,
Sure.
but I think there's a unfortunate look at these events to not in a justice way, but in a statistical way, which is really never a good way to conduct law enforcement, in my opinion. And I was a prosecutor years ago, so I've seen it on both ends, and it's not good. Um,
So are they not arresting criminals in order to decrease the crime statistics?
yeah, to dig into it more specifically, they arrest people. However, when they charge a crime, for instance, say robbery. Uh, Robbery has two elements, force and a theft. So instead of calling it a robbery, they'll call it an assault and a theft, which are two misdemeanors as opposed to a felony robbery claim, or complaint, I should say. So that's one instance. There's others. In DC, I can't speak to other jurisdictions. They have something called an injury category, where someone could be shot with a bullet. They put them in the injured category, and they don't decide, is it an attempted murder, for a while, though they don't know. Another thing that can happen is at the scene of an arrest, there's supervisors. They call them watch commanders, who are
Yes.
supervised by the the captain of the certain district. We call them districts in DC. Every state or every city has a different name for the specific parts of the city where the police patrol. So that captain may call the watch commander and hear the facts. And if they're too hands-on, they'll say, well, just charge it as X, which will be lower than what it could have been. And so that's how the statistics start to skew in a downward trend from what the actual crime is. And I don't know the reason for that. It used to be when I prosecuted in the 90s, you did it the reverse. You always overcharged. And there was complaints about too much charging, but that's generally a safer way to go. You can always lower something later. But the statistics will be higher for crime when you say it's a robbery, when maybe later it should have been not a robbery. You have a higher robbery rate, so they've been erring in lowering statistics. So that's how they do it. They do it. That burglary is another example. Someone breaks into a house. Instead of saying breaking and entering with a burglary, they can say stealing property, a misdemeanor, and damaging, like criminal mischief. So those two can be lowered. So that's how you get rid of felonies, which is a serious crime, and make them less serious to even begin with. And then it goes into the system, and the prosecutors already have a lower crime to have to prosecute. So I guess that's, I believe, I don't know, there's an investigation going into it. I only have one person who probably maybe at the epicenter of it all. That's why I know a lot about it. Someone who's very honest and who took notes and learned and can show that they kept basically changing the stats. So I can say I have firsthand knowledge of that. I don't know the whole system though, which is what uh, Judge Janine Pirro is, or just U.S. Attorney is now looking into and seeing if there's criminality, because those statistics then get reported on to the FBI. The FBI ranks cities. They get funding, because of certain statistics. And of course, then you can say, gee, my soft on crime policy quote is working because there's lower crime. So it isn't about enforcement. So it, as the old saying goes, statistics don't lie, but statisticians do. So that's, I think, what's going on, and the statisticians are unfortunately the ones getting promoted, the ones that are probably lying. So
Is this, Chris, is it people in the leadership positions that are lying about the statistics to get promoted? And or is it like police officers at the arrest level? Do they have the ability to decide too how to charge, how to rate a crime, how to label a crime so that they can get promotions?
yeah, they can initially categorize a crime, the lower end but they get overruled a lot. So depending on who your superior is, they may overrule you more. And that's when it becomes probably more obvious that they're doing it for nefarious reasons, when they're overruling a certain direction always, not, either way. Because arresting officers can make mistakes. They can arrest and not write the right crime or evaluate it right, and things maybe should be changed. However, when there's a precipitous drop, and you can see that when a year changes, and then a certain superior maybe then gets promoted after that precipitous drop, and you wonder why there was a drop, that would maybe alert you to some wrongdoing. So I would say it's more, to answer that, it's more top down than bottom up, because
Okay.
the lower person they don't have any incentive to really say the wrong thing. The incentive is for the higher ups to do so they get promoted, because they can say, look how much crime has gone down. Look how my policing and my management is so great that there's less crime. So, but there really isn't. It's just the numbers changing. And this probably has been a problem for a long time. So I don't think this is really new. It's just being exposed now because it's been used in, I guess you want to call it, progressive, super socialist cities to say that their soft on crime policies are successful. So, that's why I think it's coming to light more now, because people are that. And as you said in the beginning, there's more skepticism by conservatives of the justice system, because everyone thought prosecutors are honest, everything is up and up. And then they see that isn't the case always, unfortunately. Yeah.
And you had shared that statistics go to the FBI and then funding is received based on statistics. Is it the lower the crime rate, the more funding you get?
Yeah, not necessarily. That's certain. There's certain funding streams, and I'm not I don't know all of them in Congress, but I know there's certain types of crimes that get funded more. Like, for instance, say a domestic violence bureau will receive more funding. They don't change those stats very often, but there really isn't a lot of funding related to like robberies. It's because that's a basic crime. So it wouldn't affect the funding if there's no stream, because there isn't like anything that I've read recently passing Congress saying we want to stop more robberies. We want a robbery line of funding to go federal, because federal funding does go even to local prosecutions. So, for instance, in domestic violence cases, there is a federal stream that helps those particular prosecutions. So that's where it would. I mean, there probably should be. Maybe there should be a carjacking one, because carjackings are out of control.
Right.
in the district, and they're finally coming under control. And there's like a number of reasons for that: enforcement, youth doing it, judges letting people out, the law itself on um, bail, as we may speak of later, is been changed in DC. And it's very dangerous to be. I know people who've walked down the street and a car's flown through a stop sign and it's a stolen car. They don't obey traffic devices, so it's not just criminal to the person losing the car. You can get injured with these cars flying through the streets because there's that many. I mean, it's not like there's just a few. It's all the time, daylight, nighttime. So you got to watch when you cross the street for a stolen car running you over potentially. And there's not just one reason for that. So
That's ridiculous, Chris. Like in the United States of America, to have to be worried about being run over because there's so many carjackings going on and running traffic lights, I've never heard of that.
yeah, I have. I heard friends that are attorneys who said, "Gee, what's going on? Why is this happening?" And as I said, there's several reasons, and we can get all into all those other reasons. There's no chase policies that used to exist, where if you stole something, you basically were let go, and they were like, stop the person later. Uh, and maybe there was a good intention to do this at first, where they didn't want to have high-speed chases and police cars hitting people, similarly like a stolen car.
Yeah.
So, they didn't want that, but they went so far, they turned the lever so far that everyone's just running away. Like now with the new changes in DC, some of the criminal elements, like, hey, you can't stop me. You're not allowed to chase me. And they're like, yeah, we are now allowed to chase you. And they're like, uh-oh, so it's changed the whole mentality of the criminal, so yeah, so there's a whole panoply of reasons. But I think politically, as you may recall too, there was a whole push to say COVID caused crime, which I still can't understand that philosophy, but that was like a pushed out theory in the last administration, so when COVID was over, the crime rates had to come down to follow that narrative. So, kind of like a group following the Pied Piper leader. Everyone just did the same thing. Like, oh, crime rate's got to come down. COVID's over. And they figured out a way to do it, or certain people did, which was report less.
So on August 11, President Trump invoked the DC Home Rule Act and he declared a public safety emergency for DC, which just what little you've shared so far makes perfect sense. He deployed the National Guard to DC and he took direct federal control of the DC Metro Police Department. And he announced, and I quote, "It was Liberation Day in DC and we're going to take our capital back." And so let's talk about what the citizens of DC are being liberated from and why it took the National Guard to come in and do it.
Yeah, so I think it's twofold things they're being liberated from. They're being liberated from a system that's been put upon them that is creating a crime wave. So they're being liberated from the crime, but it's the system that's causing or rewarding the crime that existed. So, for instance, and you may have heard Judge Pirro speak about the case of the person being shot in the chest and let go when they were under 19. They were shot in a bus, and she repeats that story because the district has very lenient minor crimes due to minors. Now, how do you define a minor? They've now are ratcheting up the level of how you define a minor. So a minor, so the criminal element understands this. They're not stupid, so they recruit younger kids to be part of a gang that does the criminality because they know they're going to get let go. So I've
Wow.
been in court and seen it firsthand where you have carjackings of kids under 19 and they just get released immediately. When I've had a client in there who had something else, but and they just release everybody. So a carjacking is almost without recourse. That's why there was so much of that. And that used to be a big deal when I was a prosecutor. When we used to prosecute them, as it's been happening forever. These joyrides with crime with it, but when you incentivize it, it's going to happen more. And then you have, as I said earlier in the conversation, people shooting down the street with a car that's not theirs, maybe running you over on top of stealing the car and destroying someone else's property. And then, they don't charge it as, they may not even charge it as a felony. I mean, that can be reduced too, as to a property theft instead of there's even a charge called assault with a deadly weapon in DC, where there was a thought in the district that if you pointed a loaded gun at someone, that wasn't considered assault with a deadly weapon. They had to say, I'm going to shoot you, basically, which is crazy. And that was the
Yeah.
standard policy going around, that, okay, if you point a loaded gun at someone, doesn't count as assault with a deadly weapon. I would be scared if someone pointed a gun at me that was loaded. However, that was not how they treated that crime in the district. So, unless they had, quote, intent, but, generally when you point a loaded weapon, you have intent. So that was their reasoning, I guess, but it incentivizes pointing guns at people, so just like anything else, you don't enforce it, there's more incentive to do it. So this Liberation Day, back to the first point, the judges, they have discretion. So in that case that Judge Pirro mentioned, the judge could have ruled to put the person in jail, but
Right.
they went for the lowest possible sentence, which is probation. And they could be appealed if they were too tough, but so what? So they what I see, which is sad in these, quote, I guess progressive, how we want to call these districts, is the law-abiding citizen that gets caught gets a higher sentence than the non-law-abiding citizen that gets caught. So that, because for
Yes.
some reason they think the more criminal element is going to, I guess, fix themselves, whereas the one that messes up once, oh boy, we better throw the book at them. Like with gun possession, I've had gun possession cases. People have let their gun permit expire, no problems in their life, and they get nailed, when they come through the district, because it's a no gun. You can get a permit, but it's very hard, and you have to do things. And then a criminal, like the kid that shot someone, gets probation for shooting someone with a gun that's illegal, which is crazy. I mean, that's so. Likelihood of recidivism is pretty high when you've just been let out for shooting someone in the chest. It's not. So that's a judicial issue, and then I think juries look at what judges do, because the judges will rule against enforcement of certain things, unless it's a police officer. So you flip the script. If it's a police officer who does something wrong, then you throw the book at them. That's what's kind of really disconcerting, is that law enforcement is considered the enemy in DC and in many big left-leaning cities, I guess, to put it mildly, or how are we going to call the cities? Some of these big cities, they've, again, as I was saying, that first point, they tend to take the law-abiding person, a cop, and nail them for something. I know initially we're talking about statistics, which is also a police issue, but I would say that's more a political issue at the higher levels of policing, not the rank and file officer is doing any of that. So, but the rank and file is who they go after. So I had firsthand knowledge of an improper prosecution of one. So that's those two things. So the crime rate goes up because you prosecute the police and you don't prosecute the criminal, I guess would be a pretty simple way to put it. And that's what's going on.
Chris, I'm just sitting here trying to wrap my mind around this. So I live in Missouri. This is a show me state. There's a lot of logic here in Missouri.
Yeah.
And so this is upside down world. This is completely illogical, what I'm hearing. So I have some questions. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around it. So I'm picturing you, and it's not your case, but you're waiting for your case to come up. And you have youth, whatever that age definition is, who steal so I'm in DC, my car gets stolen, which is very true. I mean, I have worked hard to buy my car. Maybe I've got car payments going on. I need it to get to work so I can earn income to feed my, the children and pay the bills. And so someone takes what is mine, what I worked so hard for and what I need, and they have a joyride. They hit a pedestrian. They could kill somebody, but they hit a pedestrian, they injure them. Now that person could be maimed for life, could be disabled for life. They destroyed that life, probably the family, the extended family, and then they come into court and they're just sent home.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my client that day was over 80, and it was an extradition issue, so it wasn't a big deal. So I had the total opposite end of the spectrum of a person. So he shouldn't have been incarcerated because he surrendered, and it was a nonviolent alleged crime. I'll put it that way. So, but these were violent crimes. When I was a prosecutor, we never let out because they repeat. I mean, it's almost like clockwork. They will repeat and do it again. It's not a one and done. Oh, I learned my lesson. It's usually like, let's do it until someone eventually tells us not to do it. So, and even then, maybe they won't stop. But yeah, that's exactly right. And I guess it's the system, and then the judges say this is fair. So when the jurors come in, they think, oh, okay, that's fair, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can't understand how that is a mentality that exists. So I suppose the crime stats, to go back to that, it's maybe people don't think, they think the person stealing is not to blame and we're to blame. I guess that's the philosophy. So we shouldn't punish them for stealing. I think that's kind of the underlying theory. I don't know though. I am with you. I don't understand it, and I can't associate with that concept. I don't think it's right to steal, but apparently some people think it is. I don't know why. I mean, I still will defend someone if they hired me, if they were innocent in a situation. But it's just, but yeah, I don't get the. We have to have a system of laws, and they have to be enforced, and but the narrative now is everything's better, despite or in spite of police. So since the police aren't enforcing the laws as much, I think that's why this crime stats is important, because that's how they get around the lack of enforcement. So there's less enforcement, but they say crime rates are going down, but they're really not, because they're just charging things lower. So
Right.
I think that's the actual political policy answer right now. So they can go to the public and say, look, crime stats are down. Crime is down because the stats are down. Not saying, gee, we're just not charging people anymore for certain things. So, or we're not. If you have less police, you'll have less crime too. I mean, because they can't arrest as many people. So you just disincentivize, which has happened, policing. So when you have less police willing to arrest people, well, you have less crime statistics because you have less arrests. So that's also I guess, a plan, because that's what's taking place in bigger cities. Uh,
So
and
it's insane.
unfortunately,
It's insane. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
listening to you, it's absolutely insane. It's absolutely illogical. It defies common sense. It defies having a moral compass. Whenever you said that the adult criminals are recruiting young people to do the crimes, knowing they'll be let loose. Of course, they'll never learn their lesson, because they're just going to be recruited again back into the system. And to shoot someone in the chest and get probation is absolutely appalling. And I think about these victims where their lives are shattered in a million pieces, and yet there's no true justice. I have started calling our justice system the injustice system because of stories just like this.
Yeah, and when I was a prosecutor, I remember going into tougher neighborhoods, and there's good people there. They're afraid to come forward because they don't know what the repercussions are going to be. And if you're not helping them by trying to, it's tough enough just regularly to enforce crime. But if you're showing that neighborhood, hey, we're not even going to charge the people that are doing stuff to you, then it's just, then they might as well join gangs. It will incentivize more criminality, because what choice do you have? The police and the system isn't going to protect you at all. So therefore, forget it. Let's just go into anarchy. So I guess that's the short. I hope they're not thinking that's a good idea. But that's what's happening, because you have to be more proactive in the tougher neighborhoods, because people don't want to come forward. They're afraid for their. And I've seen that. I've seen, as I said, I've seen the fear because they don't want to be intimidated or hurt or et cetera as a witness, So, um, yeah. And if the system's telling them, well, they're just going to get out anyways, and they'll be back out there doing it again the next day, they'll be like, well, why would I not do the same thing they're doing? Yeah, it's too bad. But that's the lesson being taught. And the child doing crime is not a new thing. That's been around forever. I think what's new now is they're saying, well, it's not the child's fault. It's the system's fault because there isn't enough money being given. I don't know. I don't understand it, but they're trying to blame everyone but the criminal for the actions they're taking. So, yeah, yeah. So that's unfortunate. And it's nationwide, I think. And maybe not in small towns, but sometimes even small towns do crime stats. They don't want to see higher crime stats happening. Uh, I think you're just lucky if you're in a smaller town. There's less elements of crime that come there. But I don't know. I can't speak to every place, but yeah, it's too bad.
So I'm curious, you were sharing about because these upside down, ridiculous, insane, immoral, lawless policies do not apply to regular citizens. They apply to letting the criminals free and blaming everyone but the criminals. So there's no responsibility, no accountability, and frankly, everyone I'm listening to in the judicial system so far, it all sounds very criminal to me also. But you were sharing that you had an 80-year-old gentleman who, like, had he been overcharged because he was a regular citizen?
Well, that was something. Well, it's on appeal, so it was a case out of New York City, but he started in D.C. So they had an indictment in New York, so he was extradited there. It shouldn't even been taken. The case shouldn't have happened, but it wasn't a D.C. decision. And yes, it probably was overcharged in New York because that's Bragg, who's another DA that's not really enforcing smaller crimes, but enforcing, I don't know. I don't know what he's enforcing, honestly. But yeah, it's something that's happening up and down the East Coast. DC, New York are probably pretty big epicenters for this type of strange enforcement. Although DC, when a president changes, you change your prosecutor, so that's different. New York, you elect them, so it could probably only get worse. I can't imagine in New York, but they let, as you probably heard, people that steal. That's why everything's behind glass cases in CVS's,
Yeah.
because they just let them walk out the door and they don't bother to report it anymore because, well, it's too much work, or I don't know. They should have taken it anyways. They're too poor. I don't know what the answer is. But I mean, it's the totally reverse of the broken glass theory, which was, you enforce the small crimes and the big crimes stop.
Right.
Now it's like, don't enforce any of the small crimes. And I guess they think that, but the big crimes will happen more, really. So it doesn't work to stop things unless you just legalize crime, which maybe is their plan, is to just get rid of crime charges. I don't know. So yeah, so there's it's a misplaced prosecutorial, as you spoke in the beginning of your show, misplaced prosecutions. I think the prosecutions are becoming more political rather than just regular prosecution. So the prosecutor is becoming more a tool of the politician, which is pretty sad. I was a prosecutor, and I remember if it was a politician, we actually treated him twice as hard as a regular person. We would change. We would that this was though in the '90s when before things changed. So we did the reverse, no matter what party it was. So that I thought was fair. Public figures should be treated a certain way. But now I don't. Now they're yeah, they've changed. It's something I can't understand. Prosecuting today, I don't get it. And the prosecutors, sadly to say, a lot of them aren't as ethical as I knew when I was one. They're supposed to wear the white hats, but they bury evidence, let it go, and if a judge is on their side politically, they're going to say, it's okay. It's just a term they use is out of the abundance of caution. I'm going to give you information that would have been helpful during trial, but we'll give it to you now. The trial's over. Don't worry about it.
Why would they do that? Because I'm just imagining my audience being in a courtroom, and I hear this all the time from people too. Everyday Americans are in a courtroom, and the information, if they had had it during their trial, they would have easily won because they were right. And yet, because prosecutors withheld evidence, which is supposed to be illegal, they
Right.
lost their case and had horrific consequences. So, how can one person have so much power that they can, a prosecutor of all people, again, we're taught that prosecutors and attorneys should be trying to decipher right from wrong. But why would a prosecutor withhold evidence and not follow the law?
Well, I think it's almost same with the why the superior police officer might withhold the right statistics to get ahead. It's all about winning, and the incentive is to win a case at all costs. Doesn't matter if the person's innocent. So you're not supposed to do that, but that maybe is that's why they're doing it. I guess I don't know. I'm not in their minds, and I think that philosophy, unfortunately, is even in the federal prosecutors' brains. They know if they prosecute a certain political person or with a certain political bent, let's say, they might get promoted because they're now putting away someone that's the enemy of the current leader of the state the country you're in. So therefore, you'll get incentivized to do it by a promotion. You know, um, yeah, I guess I don't understand it because I had a trial 3 years ago where they prosecuted a police officer who was innocent, but the judge was biased, who biased the jury, I would say, and they helped the prosecutor. A judge, mind you, that was supposed to be the most lenient for defendants. However, when a cop was the defendant, or quote more conservative, I would say, flipped the script and became the most law, whatever, pro or against that defendant you could ever find, uh, most unlenient you could find in his rulings. So I guess it's a thought process. I don't understand it. I don't go to parties where these people talk about that. I don't understand. So maybe I'm not the right person. Maybe you need someone that hangs out at the certain watering holes that they do and discuss. Gee, we need to put more police in jail, or we need to, those whatever have to. Yeah, I don't understand. I don't know. I don't. Yeah, I don't prescribe that, but that's what's occurring, and it erodes the whole judicial system because the prosecutor is supposed to release an innocent person.
Right.
Really, there's not supposed to hide evidence. But if the judges don't enforce it, then what are they going to do? Because the judge agrees with the prosecution. You know, it's really I guess I blame the judiciary probably in the end because they are the gatekeeper of this, and they have a group think in DC, as you probably have read, and
Yes.
that's unfortunate that they do because they shouldn't. It should be every judge for himself, decide things as the facts come in, but
Right.
they go to lunch with each other. They, don't want to be overturned. They want to all keep, I don't know. I'm not a judge, but, I hear things, and I guess that's the group think that goes on in places, and at a federal level, it's dire consequences because you're not prosecuting for like minor things. You're talking years in jail when a conviction comes. It's major stuff. So yeah, 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 it's a system I think somewhat turned upside down. It's changed now a little, but if you put the right judges in, maybe it'll start to change back to normal again. I don't know.
I have heard that with the military, the National Guard coming in DC, that there are also military prosecutors being put in place.
Yeah, I honestly have not heard that. They'd have to be. I know they were short 70 prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office,
Okay.
so maybe they're being put into those roles to fill them. But they'd be deputized, I guess. I don't know though. I don't know the answer if that is the case. Maybe it is because there is
I
a
was,
shortage of prosecutors. But the problem again is if the judges keep releasing people, it doesn't matter how much you prosecute. It'll stop them for a while, but I don't know how long. The show of force is good because it happened in New York in the subways, right?
right.
The left leaning governor there put National Guard in the subways. Nobody complained about a federal takeover of anything, and people were not set on fire and thrown in front of subways anymore. That's how bad it was in the subway system. It was out of control.
Exactly.
So they kind of got it back under control, but that's only a temporary solution to show force, and then it kind of puts people a little bit at ease because it'll just come back again. It's once that force is removed, that criminal element's not gone. They're not arrested, so they're just going to come back. So it's only a temporary fix,
I
which
was
could happen in DC too. It could be a temporary fix. Sadly, it might be only temporary. This push, there'll be a massive increase in prosecutions, but if these people don't serve a just time, but it'll probably slow it down. I mean, as I was told by one of my law professors, swift, sure, and severe is how you put down crime.
Amen. Oh,
That was
I like
the old story.
I like him. So yeah, I was speaking to a retired general that I'm going to have on my show next week, and he's the one that told me that military prosecutors are now in DC.
Hmm.
And so that's in place. And I sit and I look, just eyes from Missouri looking toward DC, and I think, okay, we have the National Guard that has taken over the DC Metro Police Department, which means they would have higher ranking authority than the local Metro Police, which to me would help to guide, control, curb, make sure that the violence is taken care of. People are, and with Judge Janine on the case, we all know what she's like. It leaves me very optimistic, and I'm praying. I do hear your point. I'm praying it is not short term at all. And then we move to the rest of the nation. We're hearing that President Trump, he's now saying LA, which we know he had National Guard in LA to help there, that he's talking Baltimore, he's talking other cities, Chicago, to put the National Guard in. And I know from your background, when we were talking on the phone, you had seen um, similar things. And from your background and experience, do you believe that this is likely a nationwide phenomenon, not just limited to DC?
Yeah, well, I've been to conferences that are nationwide. I've talked to police in California. I've talked to individuals involved in policing in Chicago, of course, in New York as well. And when you say phenomenon, I guess you mean the statistical changes.
Yes, yes.
So I think it's. Go ahead. Sorry. So I mean,
The statistical changes, the prosecutors that aren't doing their job, the judges that aren't doing the injustice, the whole injustice system.
yeah, I mean, I guess they're doing a job, but they're not doing a job for justice. They're doing a job for their injustice, I would say. So yeah, in LA, I know that they decriminalized a theft under $1,000 pretty much. So what does that do? Well, you don't have any then charges for theft under $1,000. So you have a decrease in crime because you're no longer charging $1,000 thefts or under. I know one of the police officers I know, a sheriff in Torrance County, was saying, they had a stolen Amazon truck and they were told just to stand down and not arrest, just let them go. So that's more than $1,000. So you have a lowering crime stats when you don't arrest people. And then the flip side, he said, in LA County before they just changed the DA, I guess the new one's a little better. They would prosecute a cop for shooting too many times at someone. Like if they shot 5 times, they should have shot 4. They would say, well, that's attempted murder, the 5th bullet,
That's
which is like, but the
ridiculous.
first 4 were justified, but the 5th one, well, now you're attempting to kill someone. So it's a flipped over system. So then you disincentivize police from even arresting anyone. because the job is hard. You're making split-second decisions. You could be shot yourself on the job.
Right.
So you could make a mistake. I mean, and if you're like, well, if I make a mistake, I'm going to jail. You're like, well, I'm not going to pull my gun ever. I'll just let him go. It's why bother? That's the incentive that you give a police officer. So that'll also create a lowering crime stats too if you just let people go.
Right.
So it all kind of feeds itself. You prosecute police, they arrest less, there's less crime, quote, less stats, which means not that there's less crime, but there's less reported crime. So I think they all go hand in hand, all those things, creating this whirlwind vortex of just, I guess, incentivizing criminality, you know, which is not, and it's only going to come to the suburbs eventually. So the people that are like, oh, who cares about the city? Well, it's going to eventually permeate into suburbs and out of the cities. It just begins there, so you need to address the problem there. Um, and the only problem I see with the National Guard, and I know maybe this is completely off topic, it's good to have them, but they're not trained in law enforcement in the sense of arresting. They're National Guard. They're trained to attack countries. So I think it's okay they're in the district, but for them to be doing arrests, it would be beyond, unless they're military police who are trained in, an officer reads rights to people, they do certain things, but a military personnel doesn't do that. That's not what they're trained to do. So you might have a problem with too much of them doing arrests. I think they're them being in the background and adding to, showing force. I think that's important. But officers are still trained in policing, which is different than National Guards people. So, but they still help. I mean, they help as I think even the mayor of DC has said and admitted that it's helped having National Guard presence, because some of what police do is just patrol to show they're there. So
That's
the
right.
National Guard can do that, and the police can go out and find the crime, and arrest the people, and not have to worry about walking a beat, so to speak, where the National Guard could. So I think in a supportive role, they're okay, and in DC, they're allowed. The president has jurisdiction over the district. So I know the district's just filed a lawsuit against the National Guard, which I have not read yet. It just happened today. They want to get rid of the Attorney General of DC, who probably wants to be mayor, I guess, has filed this lawsuit. Haven't read it, but the president has complete authority over the district. This is a federal district, so I don't think it's going to win. I don't know, but maybe a judge, maybe there's some super left-leaning judge, which there's a lot of in the DC courts, that will rule in his favor, but then he'll get appealed and overturned. If that happens, that's a possibility. So, but that's what you're up against here. It's a fight against common sense, basically. That's
Yes, it is. And I like that phrase. And then when you go to the jury level, we were talking about that on the phone too.
right.
We watched this on the we watched this whole thing with the J6ers, where people who weren't even in DC, people who weren't even doing anything wrong, people where DC law enforcement, Capitol Police, waved them in the Capitol, holding American flags, walking through like a tourist, and yet they were put in prison. The most heinous crimes against humanity for what happened with the vast majority of those J6ers. They go to trial in DC, where they have prosecutors who are exactly like you've been describing. And not just that, but the jury. And I had someone on my show recently where the lead person of the jury, in the very beginning, when you're asked questions, can you be fair and unbiased and those kind of things, he's like, sure, I can. After the trial, they found out, and I'm not sure which one it was, but they found out that he was a strong, worked for the DNC, had worked for Hillary Clinton, was, part of Russiagate. I mean, very, very biased, leading the entire jury. That's not a jury of our peers.
Yeah, well, just the DC area is 99% Democrat, so you're gonna find like 1% Republican. So someone that worked for Hillary Clinton is like 95% of the district. So unfortunately, you wouldn't find someone who didn't work for her probably.
Wow.
Because it's the city is overwhelmingly Democrat. Even Republicans I know that live will register Democrat because there's no reason to vote Republican because they never win. So they try to skew or maybe get a Democrat to be more conservative, I guess. But that's like New York too. I mean, New York is very much so similar. So yeah, and the January 6th, and I didn't have any cases, so I don't know. But I know and talk to people in the district. It was taken at a very personal quote level in the district, meaning people who lived here thought it was an attack on them. At least that's the narrative that went out, and they believed that, and they thought these people came from other parts of the country to attack me. So that permeated the jury pool as a thought process because that's what everybody thought in DC. They took it, like I said, as a personal attack upon their city. So they didn't think, because the counter narrative is not a counter. It's probably the true narrative. We saw all these riots all year long, all across this country, and people were frustrated, and they came to the city because they saw nothing happening to these rioters,
Right.
burning federal buildings down and
Right.
different places all over the country, from the West Coast to the East Coast, and they're like, well, none of them went to jail. So they're like, wait a minute, what the heck, So it's not like two wrongs make a right, but they should have kind of balanced it, but they didn't. They just went crazy on it. So I can see, how those philosophies clashed. That's just about one incident, though, and that was incentivized. There was money to prosecute, Jason. I mean, the whole system. When I had my case that I went with my police officer, that was a national story, that was prosecuted for not stopping a chase. Basically, that no officer touched anyone, but the person perished in the chase by getting hit by another car who they were drunk in riding a scooter. So, I digress. But that was when I went in for sentencing, and that my guy was pardoned by President Trump, which I was so thankful for, because I had lost complete faith in the system with that case. That the people there were like, "Is this a J6 case?" I'm like, "No, it's just not." They're like, "You sure?" And I'm like, because there was so much of all the cases were January 6th that they
Right.
thought they all were. And I'm like, no, this guy isn't. He's like, well, did he participate? I said, no, this has nothing to do. In fact, my client defended the White House during that day. He was actually stopping the quote offenders that day, but he was still put into a thought process of he's a J6 because like 90% of the prosecutions in DC were just that. So,
Wow.
so that's the mentality was, oh my God, they're all bad. This is all, and that's all they had for, 3 years of prosecuting. That was the narrative for 3 years. So the district was that kind of microcosm because I can say I was in that buzzsaw where they thought everything was. And yeah, and so I don't know how you change a jury. The people in DC are very liberal. As I said on another show, I tried to get someone on a jury that didn't drive, and I have nothing against these cars, electric cars or hybrid cars, and I got really almost nobody. Nobody drove a truck. Okay, I'm sure in Missouri people drive trucks.
A lot of trucks here.
There's like no trucks except the guy who was illegally in the country who couldn't serve in the jury because he was not legal. The only guy that drove a truck. So the rest of the jury pool was, was not that way, and that just shows you, not. It's a certain groupthink that exists. So whether that was a Hillary Clinton advisor, everybody is. If you're not, you're really in trouble. I mean, you're not rewarded at all. So, yeah, and that's part of the groupthink, I think, in DC, and I can say as a former president of the bar, if you give awards to certain people, people are happy. If you give awards to other people, they're not really happy. So if you want to be going up a ladder, I suppose like the statistical thing, well, if I suppress statistics, I'll go up the ladder, and that's how the philosophy, unfortunately, I guess, permeates things. Yeah. And there isn't a lot of people that want to stand up to it. Get along, go along, I guess.
Which is why Judge Deneen's on the case and the National Guard. So we're going to take a brief commercial break and come back and finish the show talking about how innocent U.S. citizens are being wrongly convicted and put in prison. So hang on, everybody.
A life empowered is closer than you think. We're all looking for a better way. Reimagine what's next with a new sense of exuberance. Why not power on like you mean it? Or power off blissfully? A better sleep is a better awake. You've never moved like this before. With the energy nature intended. Imagine reprogramming the way you look at the speed of science, at longevity, at exhilaration. It's next level rejuvenation. Take control of your well-being from the inside out and outside in. The light within is ready to ignite. Be the light. LifeWave.
Please go to liveyoungerwithlynn.com and purchase the X39 and Celergize stem cell regeneration, renew the dew of your youth, reverse aging products that are the wearable MedVed. So we are back with Chris for some final conversation. It's been so enlightening, Chris. God bless you for being here today. When we were talking before the show a few days ago, you were sharing how you had also seen in your history of innocent U.S. citizens being prosecuted and put in prison when they really hadn't done anything. So I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about that too.
Yeah, so I think I might have been talking, well, there's several things I can say with policing that happened a lot. The innocent police were attempted to be put in prison, but luckily, as I said, one of my cases I had a pardon, and none of my officers that I've represented have gone to prison. So, but the last administration made policing the enemy of the state and then tried to inject, of course, race into policing. So, but I can say also, if you're a citizen, this is around here in the district, and you commit a crime as opposed to being a non-citizen, prosecutors will prosecute the citizen, but will let the non-citizen go. So I guess I think that's maybe also what you're talking about. I've seen it firsthand in court where there have been a prosecution where I represented a bank once, and it was a identity theft issue, and the person was a Russian illegal immigrant or undocumented who stole identities. And the prosecutor dropped the charge in the end. And I said, why? And the prosecutor said, well, we wouldn't want them to get deported. And I said, well, what do you mean? If they were a citizen, would you prosecute? And they said, yeah, we would then. So that's a mentality that exists in prosecuting in, this is a suburb of DC, Montgomery County, which is very close to the district. But, and I don't know why that's the case. I would think it'd be more of an incentive to, frankly, if someone's here not legally, you should prosecute them because they are already violating one set of laws. Why would you want to allow them to violate more laws? But apparently, again, this is the prosecution of uncommon sense or something. I don't, doesn't make any logical sense. Whatever political leaning you are, I don't understand how you would make that as a policy, but it is. It's a policy. So when they also say, gee, crime stats are lower for immigrants or whatever, or undocumented, well, it's probably because they're not prosecuting them. It's a philosophy to not prosecute. So sure, they're lower because the system's set up to not prosecute them. So, I find it, again, nonsensical. So, so those that are innocent, I would say that I've seen are more political prosecutions, and that's unfortunate. That's really where the system has pushed, for some reason, prosecutors to go. I don't know why, because that never was the case. I was one. I worked for both. Democrat, Republican prosecutors, They didn't care then. This is in the 90s, but now we're in 2025, and I guess, all of that's changed. Yeah.
Well, and what I believe that we're seeing too in DC right now is a microscopic view of the unjudicial system in the United States. And what is happening, as you've mentioned several times in DC, is very similar to what's happening in major cities across the United States, and probably mid-sized and small communities too. Maybe not to the extent of what we're seeing in the major cities, but the philosophy has definitely trickled down, which I believe is part of why the National Guard is going to be deployed by President Trump to get a handle on these crimes, because I look at we, the people in the major cities, being harmed so severely by the criminals while the criminals get off scot-free. And that may be how a third world operates, but this is the United States of America. And I know my audience, we the people, and it's something that we don't tolerate here, because we are all for law and order and following our Constitution. And just God bless you again, Chris, for being on today. Your insight and your experience and your background, to be able to shed some light on what is happening in DC with Judge Judy, or Judge Janine, and who's now the U.S. Attorney for DC, to highlight what she's doing, some of the rationale behind the National Guard, helping us understand why DC is such a crime-ridden area. And again, a microscopic look at what's happening in the cities. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your willingness to share your valuable insight.
Well, thanks for having me on. I think the more this information gets out, the more likely, hopefully, the system will change for the better, and justice will then prevail.
Exactly. And if you'll share again your website and the type of people that you're helping now, so people can reach out to you if they need some help.
Yeah, my webpage is my last name, as I think you can see on the screen, ZAMPOGNALAW.com. And I have focused mainly on first responders. However, if there's another civil rights type case, I will certainly look at it, whether it's Second Amendment, which is a civil right, which maybe people don't think of it that way, but it is, or others. But, I would be glad to have a consultation with you.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. Until next time, everybody, this is the Lynn Scott Hagerman podcast, where truth is rising, and so are we. God bless y'all.
Light breaks the shadow of the weary heart. Truth cuts the dark like a flaming dart. Voices rising strong to lift the call.